Hey everyone, welcome back to the stream. We're here for week 2 of building for mobile and web with Expo. So last week we spent a couple hours together working on a new app, and let's go ahead and take a look at what we built and what we're going to be building on today. So I've got our app running here on the web on Android, and in the middle this is actually a video stream of my physical phone. So for some reasons you'll see shortly, I've got my physical iPhone hooked up, sending a video feed to the computer, and we're going to be live updating and running the app on there in real time. But let's just take a look at what we have. So our app has this nice material design look and feel. It's red. We can go to nested screens and go back to parent screens. Our app doesn't do anything yet, it just has look and feel. We can pull up this navigation and go to another screen and then go back. And the same thing works on Android with some Android particular look and feel, a little bit of adjustments, but still using React Native Paper to get the material design look and feel. And then on the web, actually, it's one of the unique things about using Expo and using React Native Web, we're getting the same app running in a web browser. It's really, really cool what we can do there. So that's what we've done. I'm going to pull up the page. If you are watching, look down at the link in the, how do I point that way? Yeah, the link down there, that bit.ly link, it'll take you to this homepage for the stream. And I'm going to use this cheat sheet to remind me what we did. So last time we set up the Expo project itself, linting in auto formatting, just a little bit of config there to make sure that was running. We tied into React Navigation to use for the navigation library. And we tied into React Native Paper to use for the UI library. And we set up a good amount of the Chrome of the app, including getting most of the way through setting up the navigation drawer and dark mode support. We do have a little bit more navigation drawer and a little bit more dark mode support to do today. I guess I wrote that up above, so we can go look at that. We also ran into a bug. That was exciting and interesting to get a real non-scripted experience working in React Native open source. And we're going to take a look at the resolution to that bug a little bit later today. We got it fixed on the stream. But they've actually fixed the bug in the library, and we're going to be able to update to take advantage of that. The other things we're going to be able to do today are we're going to wrap up dark mode support by getting our placeholder pages displaying correctly in dark mode. Actually, let me show you that. One of the nice things about using a physical iPhone is I can swipe down to my control center and switch to dark mode just like that. And you could sort of see in the blurred out background that the navigation bar has been changed to dark mode, as well as the sidebar. The top nav and the side nav have been changed to dark mode, but not the body. So we're going to get the body updating in here to go to dark mode as well. We're going to set up URLs and links for React navigation. So right now, as we move around our app, we're just on the port the web server is running on. We want there to be URLs for those different pages, so we're going to get those set up. We're going to get the displaying the navigation drawer persistently on large screens and collapse on small. And we're going to deploy the web app on Netlify and deploy the iOS app on TestFlight. Then if we have time left over, we're going to work on our first feature, which is login. So we're going to get as far as we can for today. Going to have some fun together. Whether you're joining me on a recording later or on the stream live, I really appreciate it. Please say hello in the chat or in the comments below the recorded video. And let me know your thoughts and your experiences working on Expo, React Native Web, any questions you have. And feel free to reach out if there's any way that I can help. You can get me on codingitwrong.com. That's where all my stuff is available. And yeah, so let's get going. I do have, let me check my notes here for what I wanted to do, because there might have been some small stuff first. Okay, we've reviewed where we've gotten so far. Next, what we want to do is follow up on that bug in Reanimated. So we ran into an issue on the web, I think, where we were getting an error that said module not found when trying to load React Native Reanimated, which is a dependency of, I think, React Navigation. I think that's what we found. And so what I looked around and poked around in the libraries to find if anyone else had run across this issue, and sure enough they had. So this person, by Cedric is the name of the person, reported 11 days ago, so that was just 4 days before our last stream, and we stumbled across it, that there was an issue in React Native Reanimated 2.3.2. And while we were going through the code, comparing to my other Expo web app, I found that actually we were using React Native Reanimated 2.3.1 instead of 2.3.2 on that one. We downgraded it to 2.3.1 and everything started working. So that's great to get things working for them. But this library wants to know that 2.3.2 is not working. And then just 3 days ago, version 2.3.3 was fixed. There was just a main file that was not accessible that allowed other libraries to point to this library. So I'm glad we ran across this because this is a great example of the downsides of open source. I love open source. I love building open source apps, but there's almost always trade-offs when it comes to software development approaches. And so this was a real one. Everything can work great fine in general, and then 4 days before your stream, a new version of a package can be released with a bug. Everybody's software has bugs, especially mine. I'm coding it wrong. And so these things can come up. And so getting experience of how you navigate around and figure out issues like that is helpful, because if you don't run into this one, you'll run into a bug with a transitive dependency sometime. So just getting an example of going through it, I hope can be helpful. What I want to do is get updated to the latest version of this library to make sure that it works and so that we're on the latest version. Now first, before I do that, because as you'll recall, this is a bug in react-native-reanimated 2.3.2, I downgraded to 2.3.1. So before I update to 2.3.3 to see if it's working, I would really like to replicate the problem. So I'm going to stop my running app server. What I'm going to do, I'm going to update to that broken version, 2.3.2, and I want to reproduce the problem so that I can make sure that then going to 2.3.3 fixes it locally. Otherwise, if I haven't seen it fail, I don't know if maybe I've just done something to, maybe I've never updated it to 2.3.3 successfully. Maybe I'm still on 2.3.1. So I want to get onto the broken version first. This is not test-driven development, but it's inspired by test-driven development. Watch your test fail before you see it succeed to make sure that it's really failing correctly. In the same way, let's reproduce the bug that we're hoping the new version fixes so that we know that it really is the new version fixing it. I did yarn reinstall. Now we're updating Expo again. If I remember correctly, for some reason for us, it was only on the web that we saw the problem. I'll check and see what we see across all the platforms because I want to make sure it's working on all of them. So we'll just take a second to get this loaded back up. Let's see if I might have to re-click on that on Android. Oh no, it looks like it's coming up. And on iOS, I'm just going to shake it. I think that was, yeah, there we go. I got to physically shake it so you get to hear that in my voice as we're loading this all up. It takes a little while to do this, and so sometimes you can be tempted to just go as fast as you can in development, and sometimes you have work pressure to do so. But slow and deliberate steps to make sure you know that fixes are fixing things can be very helpful. All right, I do see that over here failing on the web. I could scroll down or make some space in the console. Module not found, cannot resolve react-native-reanimated because the main import file under react-native-reanimated was not working. Although somehow the app is not blowing up on iOS or maybe on Android. Maybe it's just the specific code path for that platform maybe hasn't yet pulled up that path. But regardless, this is the situation we were in before. So now that we've seen things fail, what I want to do is to update to the latest version, 2.3.3. Let's do the exact version. Yeah, let's do the exact version for now, just as a small step to install. We're going to run the app right after this again to make sure that we see it succeeding again. And that way we don't have a stumbling block coming later, another future version of a library that is going to cause problems for us. Start the server back up. Let's go ahead and, there's no reason to go to the native platforms first. Let's go to web first because that's the one that was broken before. And let's just make sure we can see that succeeding. Looks like a very sugary drink, but once again, it's just my water drink. Not because I'm healthy. I drink a ton of Mountain Dew, but I can't have any caffeine this time of day, so I'm just doing water. Being hydrated is a good idea as well. Carbonated, maybe not so much, but we take what we can get. Hope everyone watching live or catching the recording later is having a good time, whether it's the weekend or wherever it is for you. All right, our web app is booted up successfully with this version. Go to screen, go back. Let's just click all around the app. Our very trivial app so far, and that's good. So now let's make sure we can reload on all platforms. Let's just see them all succeeding to make sure that 2.3.3 doesn't break a different platform, and we'll feel nice and confident about things. Moving forward on green, moving forward knowing that everything is working. All right, native iOS is working great. Android, it's an emulator. Forgive me, Android, don't hold it against it. Is it loading? Yeah, there we go. Android's still looking good as well. Great. So let's commit this change to update to the... And actually, before I update to that version, I'm going to do one of these permissive things. 233 and install 233 in my log file. I'm going to do this. First, make this step. Update rn reanimated to 233 to skip buggy version. So let's just get that committed because we know that works. And after this, we don't really want to lock this down. I want to put one of these permissive version things. I don't remember the difference between squiggly and caret off the top of my head. So let's just see what it was before I made this change. Animated 231. It looks like when I added in there. Let's just do squiggle. I'm sure squiggle's fine. Change that to a squiggle. I'm going to rerun yarn install, but I think it's going to be just the same version. The point is just we're permitting it to do different versions in the future. 233. So this records that we had it set to squiggle 233, but the actual installed version is 233. I'm confident that didn't break anything. If you don't want to trust it, you can reload it. That's fine. But in fact, I'm just going to amend it to the previous commit. All right, so we've gotten past that bug, and we've got a version of Reanimated that's working great now. It's on the latest and greatest version. Once we have some tests and we have this up on the running on CI, I'm going to set it up with Dependabot to automatically update these dependencies to keep things up to date. But that's for a later time. So next, when I was getting ready for the demo today, I noticed something. If you look here on, and sorry, I got to get that movie recording header out of the way there. If you look on iOS, you'll notice, I don't know why it keeps popping in, but you'll notice that the text in my header bar and the little hamburger menu there are white, but all my other title bar things are black. And so that is not intentional. One or the other of those should be the ideal contrast on this background. So we want to update our header bar to have the correct colors. Now, when I looked over at the existing code that came in from the template, the status bar was coming from React Native. But when I compared to my other app, my previous Expo web app that I created, which is named Shirley, I saw that I was using a different library, Expo status bar. And I'm not 100% sure why or of the difference, but I do know that Expo status bar does tie into the light mode, dark mode settings that Expo provides. So to keep things consistent, and if Expo provides a status bar, it's probably for a good reason. I'm going to use the Expo status bar. You'll see here under the installation section that it says Expo install Expo status bar. So when you're using Expo, there's this Expo install command. And I'm not 100% sure what it does. I think it makes sure to install the versions that work with Expo, because Expo has its own native code that has certain versions of native dependencies. Installing one 4040 compatible native module. Okay, yeah, so it said the compatible version. So I'm going to install the Expo status bar. It's installed. Oh, interesting. Was that already installed? Well, I ran that command. Yeah, it looks like it was already installed. Well, cool. That's fine then. All right, let's copy and paste the config over. So we want the status bar coming in from Expo status bar. And the style, again, just looking at my cheater content here from my other app, was status bar style auto. Now let's take a look at what that says. Components, status bar props, style auto. Sets the color of the status bar text. Picks appropriate value according to the active color scheme. If your app is dark mode, the style will be light. I'm not actually sure this fits with the background color I have here, but let's take a look and see. Let's reload our native app. Seems like I probably shouldn't actually, I haven't started it. Yeah, so I stopped my server here, so the app on my phone was not able to load it up. And let me show you what I'm doing on my phone. Actually, I didn't explain that. So on my phone, I have the Expo Go app installed, and that is installed from the App Store. When I start that up, it gives me access to different apps that I have. So Surely is in here because I've run it from different mechanisms. And actually, when you're logged into Expo on your phone and on your computer, it tells you and loads up the version of the app that's running in development. And so I can just tap here, and it's going to my local network there to pull up the app. Oh, sorry, I wasn't showing you that. Let me go back. So when I see in the list here, I can see Firehose listed there. So I can just tap on it to pull it up. And now my phone, my real hardware phone, is going across the network to access the running Expo code on my computer in development mode and run it on real hardware. And that's one of the nice, extremely quick turnaround times. There's not even installation that needs to happen. Yeah, so I'm seeing here that with this red color, by contrast with Surely, it's green, and I think the dark color does work there in light mode. So whereas here, when I change it, yeah, so it's light and dark mode. And we want it to still be light and light mode. So actually we can probably code that. Let's code it live. Status bar style. Style will be light. So I think for our color scheme, unless we change it, light is going to work. So now it's light across the top, and when I change it into dark mode, it's still light as well. So that looks good. Now with the way, at least this version, I'm not so familiar with Android, but at least the way this version works, the status bar shows up above the material design bar. So if you know Android better than me, you may know better whether this fits and is correct or not. But I'm going with what I know works on my platform, and assuming things are cross-platform. Let's wait for it to reload just to see it. On web, there is no status bar. That's just part of the OS, so that doesn't really come into it. And yeah, everything looks good. Actually, I think this is maybe not doing that before. Yes, maybe that's some of the benefit that Expo status bar provides. It's actually allowing the red material design bar to extend up to the very top. And white color is showing up there, which looks right. So that's really great. All right, so let's commit this change. Again, GAP is my shortcut for git add patch, which allows me to review each change. I'm importing from Expo status bar. Yes, I want that. Status bar style light. Yes. And let's commit that. So that's status bar colors to work with red theme. All right. So now the next thing I'd like to work on is that dark mode background. Even as I'm looking at this, I can say to you, hey, don't worry, the body of this looks bad now, but it'll look fine when we build the real thing. But it doesn't feel great. It looks kind of ugly. And we do want to have a component that's ready to go to give that the right background color. And in fact, because I am using cheater mode and not inventing these things from scratch, but copying it over from my existing app, I do believe I have a background component that's going to meet this need. So let's get our sample screens with a dark mode adjusting background so that it's all going to work out great. I'm going to check over here to my code because I didn't look this up in advance, but I am familiar with this. Background, maybe not. Screens, no, that doesn't seem right. Paper drop, screen background, there it is. All right, so let's bring this across. I called this component screen background because it uses Flexbox as well to make sure it extends across the full thing. Whenever I'm kind of scaffolding out a new React Native app, getting Flexbox right to get things to fill the screen is always a challenge for me. So let's paste this in. Let's take a look in this screen background component. As we found and stumbled across last time, I need the with theme hook from React Native Paper. No, sorry, not a hook. A higher order component from React Native Paper to wrap the screen background to that so that it gets past the theme prop. So then I can say, okay, the base style, so I'm defining a style here. This is really just a view and it's wrapping the children, but I'm giving some styling to it. So it's given flex 1 so that it should fill the full area that it has. And the background color is whatever the theme's background color is. So let's take both of those out and let's just see. Oh, and we also take in any other style that's passed in. We're able to pass that along. And I forget if I might use that in Surely or I might not need it. But so let's just comment this out to start, just so we can see each of these props, these style properties taking effect one at a time. So screen background, And you may remember we have these. Where did I set those screens? Is it just in navigation? Yeah, that's right. It's just these hello screens here. So what I'm going to do, what is this error? Oh, interesting. I didn't notice this ESLint error before. Maybe it was turned off. The import is duplicated. And I've got a lint rule that says don't duplicate imports. So yeah, let's combine that and let's fix that before we do anything else. I mean, I'm going to look, but I'm pretty sure everything's fine. So I'm just going to patch in those changes. Fix duplicate import. Get that committed and we're good. And so now let's import screen background from screen background. And let's put, instead of just an empty container, we're going to put screen background on here. This should not take any effect at first. It does not. And this is screen 1. Yeah, this is screen 1. So now let's put in the background color without the flex. We save that. We view, and then we see that now we have a black background color, but it's not filling the full screen. Also, the text has disappeared. We'll get back to that in just a second. So we do want this to fill the full screen. So let's put that flex back on. Now it fills the full screen. And now if we switch back to light mode, the whole screen goes back to white. So the background of the area is now being filled in with what's appropriate for light mode or dark mode. Now how about the text disappearing? What's up with that? So what's up with that? Well, let me commit this. Let me change the text first so you're not worried that something's going wrong here. And I didn't have a line break in there in my other app, so let's just see if the linter wants a line break or not. I think it's going to put a space there, hopefully. Yeah, okay, that's fine. So in here, again, this is a throwaway component, but we just want to see an example of things working well together, so let's see it working. So this text is, I was doing a where things were defined hover last time in Sublime Text, but I don't see it now. This is a plain React Native text, but I believe React Native Paper has its own text import that handles the light mode, dark mode, and theming already. Let's confirm. Typography, text. Oh, I got another computer making a noise. 1 second, let me turn that off. You can't be doing notifications, go away. All right, I'm back. I got too many computers in here, provided by work. Okay, so yeah, just a text, normal text can come from React Native Paper, and you're going to get default typography settings, but you're also going to get light and dark mode. So let's just change the text import to come from React Native Paper. And now let's see, when we go to dark mode, sure enough, the text turns light. So just like the text elsewhere, it's always visible. And if you're curious about the button showing up the same, let me put another button in there for you. I checked this on my other app to make sure. Outline button, I think. Let's check that. Let's look that up. Button outlined. Mode equals outlined. All right, so an outlined button just has a light gray outline there. The text is the color, so it's sort of inverted from the normal button. But if we switch back, then now it's white there. So we can sort of see that that button is adjusting as well. It's not that buttons are entirely laid out from the theming. It's just that contained buttons in React Native Paper keep their color, the theme color, whether you're on light mode or in dark mode. Let's keep dark mode on. Now we just need to put that in all the other screens as well, because as you navigate around, it's not there. Depending on where you're at, you could put that in some other kind of abstraction that automatically wraps all your screens, but at least for this placeholder content here, we're just going to put screen background and screen background. Is there one more component? Another screen 1. Oh yeah, this one doesn't even have a wrapping component, so let's put that. Let's just see all of our screens responding nicely to the theme. Yep, all of our screens are looking great. Android, I can't easily change the light mode and dark mode. Let's see it on the web though. Let's pull that up just because this is going across different screens. Let's just see it working. All right, we're going to go into the OS. Hopefully no private information disclosed here. Go into dark mode. Not quite so animated, but yeah, our screens are looking good. Great. Okay, so let's commit these changes and we'll separate them out. Actually, let's say, no, let's put them all in together. So in the main component here, we're got our screen backgrounds and we got the screen background component, and we'll say theme screens, sample screens to dark mode. All right. So now we've got our screens updating to dark mode. And because I'm very weird, because I'm very old, I'm used to light mode on my Mac, so I'm going to switch it back there for now. And maybe I'll keep it in dark mode by default on the phone, just to kind of have something to compare to. Sweet. So if you're joining in now, we're building an app for mobile and web with Expo. Thank you for joining. And we're going to go on to what's next. Let's see what that is. Okay, the next thing that I want to do, well, that app metadata, that could go back. We already did this. Let's do that right before deployment. So the next thing I want to do, now that we've wrapped up the dark mode support, is actually, last time when I uploaded the app to GitHub, I saw that I didn't have a Readme, so I plopped in a Readme. Did I copy and paste this? No. I saw this. This came from my setup script, and I saw that I hadn't filled anything into the Readme. So now I'd like to go ahead and do that. And it may seem kind of trivial, like I don't know if anyone has looked at my other Readmes for a lot of my projects, but it can be good if you're jumping between different projects to remember the specific needs of each project. Or if you're browsing through the repos, if there's something you use only off and on, to know what was this repo again, and do I want to keep it or do I not? So I like to always fill in the Readmes for my projects. So let's open up the Readme here. This is Firehose Expo, and we'll say, I might fluff this up a bit later, we'll say Expo, let's say client for the Firehose link saving app. And I might link it to the backend repo later. Implemented with Expo, runs on Android, iOS, and web. Web is lowercase. All right, requirements are Yarn and Expo CLI. That's good. Installation Yarn install, running Yarn start. Click on running on an Android, iOS, or running web browser. Again, this is the template Readme I put in my setup script, and so I like it and believe in it. Testing, linting, and unit tests. Again, we'll get back to tests a bit later. Let me make sure that lint command is in there. It is. Okay, great. Well, cool. That's just made our Readme a bit more realistic, so that was nice and simple. Add app description to Readme. You know, it is convicting being on the call. If I go down the path and don't link this, it's doubtful if I'll ever come back. So let's set up that link. Make sure I've got it. It's a Firehose API, I believe. Yep, and we'll change this link into the front end later once it's available. Well, let's go back. Client for the Firehose link saving app. So let's just add that. All right, so now our Readme should link to the backend, which you would need if you were going to actually be running this. All right, now we've got the Readme. So now it's time to get to something even more interesting to start to get this to all feel really great. So for my app, I've got it running in a web browser here, and it looks very impressive and it looks neat. And if I make this narrow, as you might, it looks a lot like it does on the other platforms. I'm clicking here on my video feed. So hello, another, hello, go to screen 2, another. So that's all well and good if we've got a narrow web interface. And in fact, the web app runs great on mobile phones. And so if you don't have or want to download the native app, you can run the web app, and that works great. But if you're using the app on a full screen, on desktop or on a tablet or on one of those really big phones, having the sidebar pop over from the side may not be what you want. In some cases it might be if you have app content that you really want to use the full width of the screen, maybe a text editor or something like that. But in my case, I already know from this link sharing app that it's just kind of a narrow column. It's not too wide at all. And so I would rather have that sidebar in place, persistent all the time, to be able to navigate around on Firehose while using the app. And so that's something that I stumbled through a bit before, was able to get working on surely with the help from some folks on an open source thread there. And I don't have that link handy to pull it up, but I could find it if anyone's interested. But yeah, let's pull this up. Let's get and so what our goal is to have the sidebar be persistent and not graying out the side, just kind of living on the side of the app on wide screens. And when you're on narrow screens like a mobile phone, to have it be hidden by default and only appear when you click on the hamburger menu. In fact, we don't want the hamburger icon to show on desktop at all. So I'm going to go back over to my cheater code here to see how I implemented that, and we'll go from there. Let's see. On this side, we'll go ahead and pull up navigation. Just close all the tabs. I don't want any of the tabs. I'm still kind of new to Sublime Text. I switched over just because it's kind of nice running on an independent editor instead of something owned by Microsoft, and I don't prefer IDEs myself. All right, so let's get refamiliarized, I myself as well as you, with our React navigation code here. We have this navigation component that just has navigation contents in it, and that has a drawer navigator that has 2 screens, and each of those is a stack navigator. Excuse me just a second. All right, so let's compare to what I have in my other app here. So drawer type, drawer style. Drawer style, we can customize that once we get the real content in the sidebar. A drawer type. So yeah, let's get this prop going, or screen option. Drawer type. So drawer type. I've got some dynamic code here over in Shirley, but let's show it. Let's show the different options hard-coded and then show why we want them to be dynamic. So we'll change drawer type to permanent first. So let's take a look. Reload our web app, and now our drawer is over there on the side. And so now as we move around, it's always there. That's the experience we want on a wide screen. And again, I'm not showing any margin here in the body content, but that's something that'll be handled later. Once we get into implementing our actual screens. The key for now is just that this sidebar is always present. However, we have a problem. Now on mobile, it's always present as well, and that is the worst. It's just the worst. That is not what we want. So depending, not on our device, but depending on the width of the screen, we want that to change. And if the width of the screen or application area changes as we use the app, we want it to change, because check this out. On desktop, I could resize the window or resize the browser tools here. And as I make this small, I would love for it to disappear there as well, for that to be dynamic. So let's see how we can do that. What we can do is, instead of having drawer type be hard-coded, we can have it, when I'm using an abstraction I set up here. So let's look at that. Use breakpoints. This is something that I didn't come to right when I was first building this app, but I found it was a useful abstraction as we went through here. Breakpoints. Yeah, so let's set this up. This is going to be useful. So here, paste this in, and then we'll talk about this a bit. Breakpoint.js. So what I'm doing here is basically setting up a common place in the app where I set up my breakpoints. What is medium width? What is large width? And then what do I do at different points? This is a common design approach in the web. When you're working on a web and mobile crossover app like this can work here as well. And so what I've decided is any width under 429 is small. And then widths between 429 and 600 are medium. And then anything over 600 is large. And I forget exactly what the medium breakpoint is used for. I'm sure we'll run across that elsewhere in the app. I can even search for it to make sure we find it later. But then now I have a name, large and medium, to put in place there. I forget what that's used for as well. Let's take that out for now. Let's not move that over until we need it. And in fact, looks like breakpoint medium is also not needed for now. So yeah, let's keep this minimal. Breakpoint large is 600. Then we have this function here, breakpoint for width. Oh, I see. It's returning large or medium as the name that we compare to. And yeah, I'm going to be using that else over here. I think breakpoint medium is not needed yet, though. So breakpoint for width, we pass in a width, an actual pixel width of the screen, and then if it's over the or greater than or equal to the large breakpoint, 600, we return the string large. Otherwise, we return the string medium. And those are exported so we can compare to them other places. Those are just kind of strings to compare to. Then we have this use breakpoint hook, and it's using in turn the use window dimensions hook from React Native. We get the width, and then we return the breakpoint for that width. The way this hook works is when the window dimensions change, it's going to force the component to re-render. And so you're going to get the new width, and then in turn, we're going to get the new breakpoint back. So if we use this use breakpoint hook, we're going to be able to get updates when the breakpoint changes in order to have our code respond to it. So I'm going to save this, and now let's take a look at it in use. We're going to put this import in over here. We're importing the use breakpoint hook as well as the large string to compare against. And now what we're going to do is this. In this navigation contents, we're going to say const breakpoint equals use breakpoint. So using this custom hook, we're going to get whatever the current breakpoint is, medium or large, and it's going to update and re-render when the size changes, when it changes to be bigger or smaller. Then I have, well, let's copy this function over. Get drawer type for breakpoint. So we pass in a breakpoint and we say, oh, if it's the large breakpoint, large being the variable also coming from there, then we want permanent. So if we're on a large screen, have a permanent sidebar. Otherwise have back, which is, I'd have to look it up to see. But basically, we found that in troubleshooting this together with the community, we found that this is the option that we're able to toggle back and forth between the two. But really, the idea is any kind of dismissible breakpoint would be the other one that you would use. So then what we can say is const drawer type for breakpoint equals get drawer type of breakpoint. So we've separated out the logic. So the use breakpoint file just gives us which breakpoint we're in, which is a general thing we're going to be using throughout the app at various places. And then this function, get drawer type for breakpoint, is a very local concern just to navigation. So we don't need that elsewhere. So now what we can do is set the drawer type for breakpoint right here. And there's another iteration we're going to need to add after this shortly, but let's just start with this. So the idea here is that we're getting either permanent or back as the drawer type to use, and that's going to change whenever the breakpoint changes. So what this should allow us to do is to, although actually it looks like my mobile app is blown up. Seems like I've done something wrong. Let's reload the web app here. It seems like it's not automatically reloading. Cannot find module breakpoints. So it seems like I've got a URL that's wrong. Breakpoints, plural. Ah, okay. I made it plural. Okay, so let's try that. Our app is loading. We're now on a wide screen and we've got that permanent sidebar. So let's narrow it. And now when we narrow it, the sidebar goes away and we can toggle it in. Now when we go wider, it pops in, it appears. And so even as we're resizing our window, our drawer goes to permanent when we need it because we only need this much screen space. Or when we need the full screen space and we can't have it permanent, it goes away and we've got the contents there. Things might be a little bit weird in that size there, so we may tweak that once we've got the final app with the final sidebar width. But that's good enough for now. And let's just check on the other platforms. On iPhone, we got our dismissible sidebar. You can always reload it if you're not positive that the app reloaded. So let me just reload here in Expo to make sure we've got the latest and greatest and that everything's working. I'm going to start patching my changes here while we're waiting. Let's make the breakpoint logic separately. Add breakpoint logic. That could be a separate commit. And we'll look at navigation. We import that. We say make sidebar persistent only on large breakpoint. And I won't commit it yet because I want to make sure Android works first. Yes, and the sidebar dismisses on Android. Okay. So the other thing that I want to do is look up another edge case that I'm copying over in the code, because this is one of the last bugs that I actually fixed on Shirley. So let's see if this problem is still happening. So while testing this, while experimenting with the sidebar and trying to get it to hide and show a lot, I went back and forth a lot. And I think when I did this a bunch of times in a row, I eventually got it starting to error out. Maybe it's not happening now. Maybe Safari's okay. Let's try this in Firefox, because I was testing in Firefox, Safari, and Chrome, and in one or two of them we had this bug where things would error out. So let's just give it a try here. If I can't replicate this, I might save it to next time, because I don't want to add code in unnecessarily. I want to know that it's really go away bookmarks toolbar. I want to know that's really fixing something substantial. So we've got our app in, well, for that very tiny width, it shows a little weird, but that's okay. And so we've got it so that as we resize the window in Firefox as well, it's hiding and showing. But let's do this a bunch of times in a row, and let's see if we get an error. It could be that it was fixed. I mean, this is, this is an error, some kind of timing error, where just doing something repeatedly was causing something to error out. And it looks like it's actually fine now. Really, the only fix that I put in place was just to handle this so that this wasn't erroring out when I was going back and forth a lot like this. So this is actually interesting. I had to put in like a set timeout in Shirley to prevent a problem here. But so this is a great shape. But I'm going to put a comment in here as a note to myself to double check in the future to say to do. And putting it to do for yourself in the code can be a good way to remind yourself. Check and try to reproduce problem with too many updates from Shirley. Couldn't reproduce so far in Safari and Firefox. Fixed. So I'm going to go later offline and research, while not on the call, what was it that I needed an extra workaround for? And can I in fact still reproduce the problem in Shirley? Because if a workaround is no longer needed, this is a great opportunity to remove it. This is why I'm glad that even though I'm cheating and copy and pasting code over, I'm making sure that each piece of it is really needed. Let's add this comment. Add to do about rapid resize workaround. All right, so now we have a responsive sidebar. And I've got to say, once I got this working in my kind of trying out of Expo, this got me really excited, because what happened was I felt that the app felt really great on mobile screen sizes in native mobile apps as well as mobile web. And my app also felt really great on larger sizes as well, even larger than that. This is so much the pattern for my personal apps that I'm even thinking about putting this in its own reusable library. Basically my own kind of wrapping theme for using React Navigation and React Native Paper, because I'd like to share it across Shirley and Firehose and one or two other apps. One that I already have that I'm probably going to port to Expo Web as well, and another app that I'm thinking about writing right now. I would just love to be able to drop this stuff into an app, because for me personally, I've found that this stuff is really useful in kind of the way I want to set up my apps in general. And I'm doing it on the call now so y'all can see how these things work together, because you may have a different setup you want to make these things work than I do. But for me, if I've settled on, yeah, this is the way I want my apps to work, and if I find an improvement, I probably want to replicate that improvement across all my apps. So it's a good opportunity for a standalone library. I might do that on a future stream. We'll see, depending on how we go. I do want to get the core functionality of this app working, because I think that'll be more interesting for y'all. But on some future stream, some future week, we may pull out this React Navigation Paper skeleton into a standalone library, and we will get to stumble through creating a React Native shared library. I've done it once or maybe twice, but getting the build setup working can be interesting with those things. So we'll see. Again, if you're new in the chat on the stream, we are building an app for iOS, Android, and web on one code base with Expo and React Native Web. And it's working. We got it going. It's cool. It's responsive. Feels really neat. Looks nice and responsive like this on tablets as well. So we're rocking and rolling and making good progress. I remember one other thing about the responsive sidebar that we need to do. Check it out. When we're on a wide screen, a large breakpoint, and we have the sidebar on the side, we still have this hamburger menu that allows us to toggle the sidebar. I'm not sure actually what's going to happen. It's a no op. And so we actually don't want that there. We want that just to be hidden. We don't need anything at the top right when we're on a large screen size. So that's something we can make responsive as well. So let me see where I did that. That's in our custom navigation bar. So in the navigation bar we set up, we built this last time so that the navigation bar that React Navigation uses would be using the app bar from React Native Paper. And we're able to conditionally put in a back button, put in a content, and then unconditionally put in the menu to toggle the drawer. So that's what we've got to make conditional now. And let me just check and see how I did that. Navigation bar. Show drawer. Yeah, okay. So when I set this up, I made this just sort of a nice descriptive function. Show drawer toggle for breakpoint. And we said, I guess we need the imports again as well. We're going to basically, again, pass in the current breakpoint and say, oh, yep, if the breakpoint is not large, we want to show the drawer toggle. You could also say breakpoint medium, but if we add small and other breakpoints in the future, things can get a bit messier. So let's do it this way. We're going to again use the use breakpoint hook to get that data on the current breakpoint and update it as the size changes. Then we're going to create a show drawer toggle variable and take in the results of this function. And that just getting that logic out of the component just makes it a little easier to see what is the drawer toggle depending on which breakpoint we're at. And I had to put a lot of, maybe not this one, but I think the drawer prop type, I had to put a lot of thought into which type of drawer, whether it's permanent. I think that's why I ran into that bug where I was moving it back and forth 100 times and causing my browser to blow up, was because I was like, is this right? What is the right width? Is this resizing properly? And it was kind of just blowing my mind. So separating that logic somewhere you can see it kind of standalone can be helpful. So what we're saying is, if we want to show the drawer toggle, then it appears there. And if not, it doesn't. And just because of the way the React Native Paper app bar works, we can just drop in an app bar action or leave it out, and everything just goes where it should go, I believe. Now we'll find out if I'm right or not. It's reloading the web page. Now we can see on the large size that the drawer toggle is not showing up there. Let's add the my little web browser tools here so I can resize it again. Unexpected token. That looks like that might have not have refreshed properly. Sometimes there's well, no, that looks right. Yeah, look at that. So there's a parentheses there that I think is not. Oh yeah, I need another parentheses here so that this works as sort of a single expression. So I'm surprised that redisplayed correctly at all, actually. Let's get it to rerun. It's there at the large size. The toggle doesn't show because we've always got the sidebar there. And now let's scroll it down. Now that the sidebar disappeared because we're on a narrow screen, we have the toggle. And we can toggle it off and on. So we get up larger, it disappears. And because we're using the single component, a single module here for breakpoint, and the single use breakpoint logic there to centralize that logic, the calculation should be exact. The second, the very pixel that the sidebar disappears, the toggle there should appear. That's why you don't want to duplicate that logic across different components, because you might have an off by one error or something like that. So let's see. I might not move exactly 1 pixel. Yeah, we're pretty close there though. Yeah, so there, it's wide and there's no toggle. And then as soon as it disappears, we've got the toggle and we're good to go. Something else I needed to spend a lot of time thinking through and getting working was, if I've got the component, the drawer expanded like this, does it cause a problem? And it does not. Nope. Actually, at this width, it does. So that's weird. Oh, no, it doesn't, because when you click on this slides over and the sidebar is there. So yeah, actually, this is fine. As we're going out of wide and narrow, wide is just over there on the side, and then narrow, it's just pulled out and you can dismiss it. Now, that's not too common a thing you'd run across, but just having that nice edge case handled just makes things feel nice and clean. And let's just check on iOS and Android. We still, at least on these phones, it's not so wide, so it's just always going to be in medium width, and so you're always going to have the toggleable sidebar. So yeah, this feels really nice. This feels really professional. We don't have the hamburger menu when we don't need it. We have it when we need it. And by need it, I mean I'm not a designer, and so I go with these paradigms, and y'all who are great designers can do much better. All right, on our custom navigation bar, let's get this code committed. We've got the show drawer toggle for breakpoint, and the change is really that we're conditionally showing the hamburger menu there. And we'll say hide hamburger menu button on large breakpoint when sidebar is persistent. Great. With that, I think our responsive sidebar is done. So that's a big stopping point, a big amount of progress we've made, and we're not even halfway through the stream today. Although if we get, I ran over a little bit last time. If we get close to the end and we're just about done, 5:50 or so Eastern, we may call it a stream. But yeah, so let's see how far we can get. We've got our responsive sidebar. Now we're starting to move towards deployment. And so I'm trying to think through here what is needed, because I know the change I need to make, but I'm not sure what in all it's needed for. Maybe I could build the app first to show the need for those things. So yeah, let's build it and see what we get out of it. Although, the iOS build is going to take a while. Let's do the deployment. Let's do things, really take this on a need-by-need basis and build what we know we need. So we've got something working here. And let's now make sure that our app is actually deployable. We've got it running locally on web and on mobile. Let's make sure we can get it running on the app stores and on the web. And just as a note, I am not yet prepared at this moment to put it up on the Android Play Store, just because I haven't used Android for my other projects. I'll think about that. Let me make a note to myself on Google Play. I, like a lot of iOS users, deprioritize Android. If I was making an app professionally or for a side business that I really wanted to target Android, I might release it on the Play Store. This one actually, currently the backend is just personal. Like you have to run your own backend for Firehose to get the API going. So I don't need an Android version right away. So I'm probably not going to set up, well, I'm going to think it over. I haven't yet set up a personal Google Play Store account as a developer to be able to upload Google apps, but maybe we'll try it in a future week. But for today, we're going to build the app for iOS and for Android. Let's do iOS first, just because... No, I didn't mean to say that. I meant to say web. Let's build for web first, just because it tends to run faster. And yeah, I mean, if iOS was taking us a while to download dependencies or something like that, I'd want to wait anyways and not kill my computer. So let's look at release. I'm going to look at how I had this set up over on Shirley. It's pretty much built in, but I have a little bit of shortcuts. Oh, the other thing that I'll say about this is, you might say, well, we don't have anything useful yet. Why would we focus on deploying? Like, why bother when nothing is useful? One of the reasons, and it comes out of a book, I don't think I have a paper copy of it, Growing Object-Oriented Software Guided by Tests is one book that advocates for this principle. So the principle of, like, really test, I forget the term they use for it, really test out your whole stack from the start. I think they use the term skeleton or walking skeleton, interestingly, to refer to this. Basically, let's get everything running end to end, because I know, at least in my other app, that I can build for web and for iOS, but maybe something is not working anymore. Let's run across it as soon as possible so we know if there's a deployment problem. Otherwise, you can run into a situation where you've put a ton of effort into building the feature functionality of your app, and then you get stuck at the last minute unable to deploy. So deploying early and often is a really good idea, and it can get you a point where you're doing just kind of rapid deploys where, I mean, on the web, it's maybe even every merge that you do of a PR down to your main branch gets released potentially, at least to a staging environment. So that's why I want to go ahead and get building working now before we've even built any useful features of our app. Let's see there, Expo build web. All right, well, let's just run that command by hand first. So Expo build web. So this is going to compile our app into static web assets, I think. So let's run it and see what happens. And I'm just looking ahead here to see what else we're going to need to do. The other thing we're going to need to do, I deploy my front-end apps currently to Netlify. So let's get logged into Netlify. You can deploy your front-end assets wherever you like. EC2, personal server, anything like that. I'm on Netlify. Funnily enough, I don't use Netlify for automatic building. And let me just stall to fill the time by talking about that. You can see here it says builds are stopped on all of these sites. The reason why is because I use Dependabot to update my dependencies very frequently. And it makes an independent pull request for each dependency update that merges down separately. And I do that to run my automated test to make sure that the app is still working in each of those updates. So as a result of that, every time a PR opens and at least every time the app merges down, it does a new release. So at the end of the start of the month, when is the JavaScript world, where a dozen or more dependencies might have been updated. That's 12 builds, one after the other, with no benefit. And it can crunch through my free minutes, my free 300 minutes on the Netlify program. So I don't build so often that that's needed, and so I've changed all my apps over so that builds are stopped. But Netlify still provides me great abstractions as far as it's just a place. Run a command, it uploads the folders. We get navigation working just fine. Oh yeah, navigation. I forgot about navigation. I got to come back to that. I'll do URLs for web. That's what we can do after deployment, is get URLs working on the web. But it gets multiple URLs within domain working, even setup of domain names and stuff like that. That all works out really nicely for deployment. Yeah. So our build is almost done here. And you'll notice here there's some warnings. Asset size limit. The following assets exceeded the recommended size, 500 kilobytes. Material community icons. So because we're using React Native Paper, this material design is included, and it makes it pretty big. The entry point is 1.3 megs. So at this point, I have a confession to make. This is pretty big for a web app. This may not be ideal for your use case. I mean, it's certainly not ideal. It may not work for your use case. So for a professional project using Expo Web, you may want to look into breaking this down into separate entry points so your app loads faster. Now for my personal hobby project, Surely, this works fine for me. On desktop, as one of the few users of Surely, if any, it loads fine. And when I'm using my mobile app, the size of the built mobile app doesn't matter because it's all downloaded. I don't know. I'm pretty sure that Expo has options like Create React App and other common React web systems for code splitting, where you can have dynamic imports and things are imported as they're needed. So you can play with that. I haven't quickly reached for that on my projects because there can be instability that comes from that too. Like what if the web is accessible for the main screen and not accessible for the other screens? So you don't necessarily want to jump right to that code splitting unless it's helpful for your use case. But all that to say, you can make the performance better. I haven't done that for my apps, and I haven't done it here, but it's something we could consider in a future week playing around with. So that's why I'm ignoring this warning, is what I'm saying to you. So the app is built, but let's scroll up and see what it says. Web bundling complete. Does it tell me the folder to put it in? It's a standard folder. Web build, that's the one. So if we take a look at this web build folder, this font size may be a little bit small on your screen, but you can see we have an index.html file with a bunch of stuff slammed into it. We have a manifest JSON, which is useful for progressive web app type features, running apps from home screens and stuff like that. Serve.json, don't know what that is. Something related to some server. We have favicons. And so this is interesting. Notice this is the Expo icon, not an icon for our app. So that's something we're probably going to want to change at some point. You have some fonts included, material community icons. Apparently material design, at least the way that React Native Paper uses it, it's an icon font that some of those icons or all of those icons come from. And then under static, we have JS. We have our JS chunks. So there's a little bit of our project that is split up into separate pieces automatically by Expo Web, but this is the JavaScript where our application code lives. And so this web build folder is what we want to put on the server. If I was prepared, I could have had that command. I think it's just the npm serve command that we could run here to try it out locally to see these static assets running locally. But because I'm cheating and looking at my other project, let's just go ahead and copy and paste things over. Netlify. Now I got to check and see my configuration, site ID. Yeah, there's going to be some initial setup here to do. Also, Netlify CLI updates a lot, so I like to get the latest version. So let me just run that command. npm install-g Netlify CLI. So if you want to use Netlify as a hosting platform for your web assets, this is what you can run initially or run it to update it to get the CLI. And I expect it's got a really great CLI interface where if you haven't set things up yet, it'll generally prompt you for what you want to do. So we'll take a look at that. Another thing we need is a redirects file. So let's copy and paste that over. I remember looking into this a bit. I've commented this file a bit to see. So you can see this is the Netlify config for client-side routing. You know, actually, I do think I want to come back to this because I want to drive these configurations to only reach for them when they're absolutely necessary. So instead, I'm going to back off from that. I'm going to put that in my personal notes for us to come back to And that way we'll be able to automate that later. So we're still deploying Netlify CLI. And once that's in, we're going to be able to run Netlify deploy prod. I think I'm going to add, while we're waiting, just to stall for time, I'm going to add a new site through the UI. I imagine that could probably work through the CLI as well, but let's add it from here. So you've got a free Netlify account. Let's say start from a template, import an existing project. I guess that's it. Oh yeah, okay, from a Git repository. So this is saying we want to set up this project from this Git repository. Even though we're going to manually deploy and push the stuff up, we'll still connect it to our GitHub repository here. We're authorized. Look at all my personal repos here. We'll say Firehose. Just searching through my repositories. Firehose Expo. We want to deploy the main branch. These commands actually aren't going to matter much because we're not going to automatically do it. So let's just say deploy site, and then we're going to cancel out of it right away. This is very atypical because usually you would let Netlify do your build for you, but instead I'm going to not do that. So let's cancel the deploy. Deploy settings. I don't remember where the setting is. Like Netlify stop builds. Let's just Google this. Site settings, build and deploy to continuous deployment build settings. Continuous deployment, build settings, stop builds. Netlify will never build your site. You can build locally via the CLI and then publish new deploys manually via the CLI. Again, I am very weird in how I use Netlify, but this is me, and so you're going to have to deal with me coding it wrong. So let's save this. We're going to stop our builds. And then from here, you see I've been assigned this domain here. I'm going to go ahead. Ultimately, I'm going to set this up with a subdomain on my own domain name. And you can set this up. Netlify has great documentation for doing that. But just while we're here, we're just going to give this a name under the netlify.app domain. We'll call this Firehose. Probably Firehose is taken. Firehose Expo. So that's fine for now because this is just going to be a temporary name. So that's the domain it's going to live at. So now we want to run the deploy command from the CLI here. Netlify deploy prod. And do I need this Netlify configuration? Yeah, I don't know where that is set actually. Let's just run this and see what Netlify does. I bet you it's going to prompt us with good stuff and kind of set it up for us. And then maybe I'll get to see what diffs it makes. Okay, so let's check it out. This folder isn't linked to a site yet. What would you like to do? Link this directory to an existing site or create and configure a new site. So yeah, as I said, you don't need to use the Netlify GUI web interface. You could do that. But because we have used the web interface, because we were stalling for time, now we can link this directory to an existing site within Netlify, the site we just set up. How do you want to link this folder to a site? Use current git remote origin. So my local project folder, Netlify can see that it's connected to a certain git origin repository. That's the same one that we connected in the Netlify user interface. So by choosing use current git remote origin, Netlify is going to be able to connect this. And because I should be already logged in, it should connect it up just fine. Also, I see it said adding local Netlify folder to git ignore file. So that may be, because it's ignored, probably this is something you need to do on each client computer that you set up. I haven't actually set up Surely Expo on a new computer before. So once I do that, I'm sure I'll stumble across all kinds of things. So let's use current git remote origin. So now, usually I just let this thing go green, but let me check it out here. Directory linked, site URL, firehoseexpo.netlify.app. So that's the right site. Abel5173 says, hey guys, thanks for saying hello, Abel. Really glad you're here. You may have the context, but we are building an app for iOS, Android, and web using Expo and React Native Web. And we just have a sort of hello world version of it working now with just like a nice look and feel and sidebars, and it's working on all the platforms. And what we're doing at this particular moment is we're getting the web version of the site deployed on Netlify. So Abel, very glad you're here. Please feel free to ask questions or give commentary in the chat as we go. And I'm glad you're here and we're on this journey together. All right, so it says it saved my site ID to this local config, so it's remembering locally which Netlify site we're connected to. Deploy path, deploying to main site URL, deploy is live. I'm not sure that it knew which folder to deploy to there. Oh, yeah, it looks like it knew about the web build folder. I don't actually know how it knew that, but that's kind of nice. Netlify is pretty magical like that sometimes. So it may be good to go, or we may have something that we've stumbled across that's not working right that we need to look into. So let's just find out. It's error-driven development. Website URL, firehouseexpo.netlify.app. We click on this and pull it up. And our app is working. So just like that, our app is running on the web. And so Abel, if you wanted to, you can go to firehouseexpo right now, .netlify.app, and see if the app comes up okay for you. If you get errors, I may not be ready to troubleshoot them right away, but that would be really fun to see if that's working. Also, we could pull it up on my phone, so if we wanted to, but I don't want to do that right now. So our app is deployed to the web. That was nice and easy. No offense, Apple, but the deployment to iOS is going to be a bit more complicated than that because that's how these things tend to go. So let's get that started next. Let's give a try for deploying our app to iOS. So to go to the App Store for iOS to have apps available publicly, you need to go to one central place. That's the way Apple works. Some downsides to it. There's some security upsides to it. When it comes to deploying test versions of your app, there's a few different places you can go. And these services have been bought and moved around. I think Microsoft App Center might be the name of one of the services. You can actually have a single place in there where you set up your iOS and Android apps and deploy them out. For me, because on my apps, as a personal customer, I just need iOS and web. Going directly to Apple works okay for me. And so we're going to go through the steps, and I think what I'm going to do is get a local build running, and then I'm going to go into Apple's web interface to set up the app in there. And we'll be able to go through things from there. Yeah, Abel says, I'm just a beginner, so I'll just listen till I catch up. Well, great. I'm glad you're here. This is a great way, following along with this series, to get a feel for what Expo does, how Expo works in general, as well as how Expo for web works. And so just getting a taste for whether this would be appealing to work in or dive in. React Native has great documentation, and Expo has great documentation. So you can hit that up if something here is interesting. You can kind of try out these technologies locally. And in fact, I will say, as we're getting into iOS development here, even if you're not using Expo for web, which is kind of a rare use case, just using Expo for mobile development, this will show you what it's like to use Expo to publish to iOS. So I'm going to now look over at my Cheater app, the other app I have running in Expo, to see how I set up the build on there. Well, no, I've got it in the Readme. Actually, yeah, I'm just kind of cheating here. So yeah, let me copy over these release README notes because I found that this was actually helpful to have this in the README because working on these side projects, this is another thing that READMEs can be great for. Notes to yourself to say, how did I deploy this app again? What were the instructions? So I'm going to copy these iOS release instructions over to my README. And so I have a reminder here to myself to increment the iOS build number in app.json. So let's open that up and take a look at that first. App.json is the configuration for your application within Expo. So I haven't changed anything here. So you can see there's some colors, there's some icons, there's some names and stuff like that. What I want to do here is just leave these settings exactly as they are, see how everything plays out as we build the app. And then from there, we're going to be able to see what we need to tweak if something's not showing up the way we want. So this says iOS build number in app.json. And it looks like I don't actually have one of those. So Expo might tell me that I need to do that, but let's see what happens if we don't. That way, if you're running these things locally, you'll see what happens with that edge case. Then we're going to run yarn build iOS. Now, is that something that I set up in here? Yeah, okay. All right, so let me copy this command over because we're going to want to talk through this. So the build iOS command here runs a command called EAS. EAS, build platform iOS local. So let me show you what this is. This is a CLI tool called EAS CLI. I already have it installed, or I should, but let me show the install command you'd run. npm install -g EAS CLI. And while you're doing that, let's pull it up. We're going to go into Expo's docs and look for EAS. And if you just searched on Expo docs for how do I deploy to iOS, they have good documentation here. Oh, well, this page doesn't have, oh, there we go. EAS Build is a hosted service for building app binaries for your Expo and React Native projects. So Expo, we run within this nice environment where we just have our code running locally. We don't even need to have Xcode or Android Studio running or anything like that. And I even showed how on a native iOS, we have this Expo Go application that we download, and it just loads in our JavaScript code, and we're good to go. So if you're just playing around and experimenting with building in Expo and building with React Native, that's all you need to do. But once you say, well, I want my own app with a home screen icon, and I want to be able to release it to the App Store, now you need a real native build to happen. Expo has had a few different ways to do this over time. Actually, when I first started my previous Expo app, Surely, there was an older way to build it that I've now forgotten. But EAS is the new way moving forward. So Expo is they're a business, and so they have a paid service where you can use EAS Build to run on their servers, and they handle all the builds for you. You don't even need to have a Mac to build an iOS app because it'll build on their servers for you. It is kind of nice to be able to run locally to test it out. But I am cheap, and this is a side thing. This is not my professional. I'm not currently using Expo for professional work. I think it's $29 a month currently. Maybe I should be supporting them because I do like them a lot, but I'm supporting them with publicity right now. So that's good for the moment. But so for you, who is not me, who doesn't want to pay $29 a month, like I don't want to pay $29 a month yet, there is a way to do builds locally. Now in this case, kind of similar to the Netlify thing, we're going to run our Xcode builds locally to build our iOS app, and then we're just going to be able to upload it to Apple. That way you don't need this EAS server, and so you don't need to spend that money. It is a bit more cumbersome. There's a lot to install locally. It'll take a little while. It may blow up on us. We'll see what happens here. But it's a way. Expo has emphasized, as they've rolled out these paid services, they've emphasized that Expo is open source software, and they're committed to keeping it free, keeping a free option for everybody to use it, and hopefully not in a cumbersome or terrible way. And so Expo for free still works great for me, and so it could work great for you. And of course, if you're running a business and making money off of this app, probably you can swing $20 a month for Expo. Please support them in that way. But with all that said, let's take a look at how EAS works to run locally. So I say EAS build platform iOS, and then the local flag says run all the Xcode build stuff locally, not on their servers. So let's just run that step, yarn build iOS. And let's see just how long this is going to take. We may need to look ahead a whole bunch to keep this running. All right, so we're going to get prompted for some initial setup stuff. What would you like your iOS bundle identifier to be? There's a learn more link here, and that's good. I've done normal native iOS development a few times over my career, and so some of these things are familiar to me. But if this is your first time, you're like, I'm a React developer, I'm using Expo and it's great, but what is an iOS bundle identifier? So because you're deploying to these native app stores, you do need to learn about iOS and Android's differences. And so there's no avoiding a little bit of learning there. But because I'm familiar with this, I can say, yep, codingitwrong.com is my domain name. Visit me at codingitwrong.com. And it's very common to kind of use a bundle identifier that's a reverse version of that, com.codingitwrong, and then you make just the name of your project underneath that. So this is a good default iOS bundle identifier. I'm sure it'll be fine. You can sort of change it later if you need to. Learn more if you want to learn more as you make choices of your own app. Do you want to log into your Apple account? Yes, I want to log in here. Yeah, it's going to pre-configure stuff. So Apple build configuration is complicated. Even when you're using Xcode tools, it's complicated. And Apple has made it better over the years, but you'll get errors about certificates and stuff like that. Luckily, Expo does handle a lot of it for you, so that's very nice. And when you want to be a JavaScript developer building these React Native apps, it's nice if it'll handle it for you. So I say, yeah, I want you to log into my Apple account. Yes, please. There's my Apple ID. I guess you can see that on the recording now. Luckily, I didn't need to put anything. So hopefully that team ID there is not a problem. That shows up on the stream. I'm already logged in. You'd be prompted for a password locally if you hadn't done that before. I want to reuse this distribution certificate? And it's used by Coding It Wrong Surely. Distribution certificates are just a way to authenticate that you can actually distribute stuff, and kind of it's security stuff that's over my head. But basically, I would say, yeah, reuse it unless you have a reason to do otherwise. So sure, Expo, I'm going to go with the defaults. Generate a new Apple provisioning profile. If the default is yes, then sure. That is another thing that secures things, apparently. Expo is connecting to Apple, so you don't have to. Would you like to set up push notifications for your project? This app is a link saving app, and I don't currently have a use case for notifications because it's always by me that I'm adding things in. So I'm going to say no. I am sure that I could add those in later if I needed to, and it would be really fun. Maybe I can come up with another project for a future stream where we do use and need push notifications. I did a blog post series a few years back where we used Expo for push notifications, so maybe I could do that on the stream for fun. Fastlane is not available. Make sure it's installed and in your path. So Fastlane, if you know, so React Native is built on these multiple layers of things. So there's iOS development. Fastlane is a build tool, open source build tool to automate stuff with iOS development. It's written in Ruby. React Native is built on top of multiples of those, and then Expo is built on top of that. So when you're doing that local Expo build, you have to have all these things in place. The reason Fastlane is not available is because I'm a Ruby nerd, and so I've updated Ruby to the latest version, 3.1.1, and I just haven't installed it since then. I'm going to take this opportunity to add this to my requirements here, and I'm going to copy these over from the Readme, but then we'll get those installed. And so in addition to Expo CLI, we need EAS CLI, and we need, and I can already tell from my bookmarks that CocoaPods is something else we're going to need, and Fastlane as well. So I'm going to, in addition to the Fastlane error we got, I'm going to install CocoaPods as well. And you could look at these readmes to see how, but it's gem install Fastlane. Abel said, sorry, but what kind of app are you building? Yes, thank you for asking that. If you go to, I'll answer this real quick, but also if you go to that bit.ly link there, bit.ly/Expo Web Mobile, you'll be able to see all the information on there and read it more in depth. And I will read off of there to remind myself. We're rewriting the front end of a link saving app in Expo. The link saving app is Firehose. And so this is an app that I built to save links. It's like a reading list. Unfortunately, I'm logged into my personal version now. I don't know if I have some personal stuff in my links there that I don't necessarily want to show publicly on the stream, but I'll be ready for next time with the sample version. Let me say sample version of Firehose. But yeah, but I will say, so far we've actually done nothing that's specific to Firehose other than choosing a red color for the theme. We've just been building the basic foundations by setting up the look and feel of the app and the sidebar and stuff like that, but we haven't put any functionality in yet. We might not get to any of that today. Maybe next stream we're going to actually start integrating with the backend I have to pull in links and add new links to be saved and display them and be able to click on them from a list and mark them as red. So that's the app we're building. But everything we're doing so far would work for any Expo app that you're working on. So kind of reusable knowledge there. Let me, I'll paste the link in the chat so you can read about it a bit. Firehose API. I think that was in my README actually. So there in the chat is Firehose API, and you can read a bit more about it there. And you can pull up the public version of it there. But yeah, your ability to get too much into the details of what the app is limited right now. I'll have more of that ready for next stream. So I am installing Fastlane because that we found was a requirement to do that local building from Expo, and it's building native extensions. This could take a while. So these are the steps that you skip if you do have that paid Expo service, EAS build, because that's all running on their systems. Okay, so we've now have Fastlane installed, and as I said, I noticed from my notes there that we're also going to need CocoaPods. Gem install CocoaPods. CocoaPods is a dependency manager for native iOS code. Analogous to NPM. And so we're installing CocoaPods so that can be installed. Because React Native is built on top of that to use some of the native dependency we have. And we see that installed okay. So now that we've installed these native dependencies, we can rerun yarn build iOS. And now EAS is going to start over again from the start, try the build. Hopefully it's remembered a lot of things from before. It is going to prompt me again to log into my Apple account. I'll say my developer ID, which pre-populates again, and that's going to go through. And we'll see how far it gets this time. Would you like to set up push notifications for your project? Once you have a successful build, it doesn't prompt you for that each time, so I think it's just the fact that we error it out early. I'll say no. I said a little while ago that one of the reasons to do a build of your app before there's anything useful in it is to get through the build and deployment process to make sure you can get all of that working. And that's what we're doing it now. It can be challenging to get things set up on iOS, on web, on Android. So notice here, we're getting big red warnings here. There's not actually a problem. If you do a lot of NPM development, you know that warnings can be spit out. And for some reason, this tooling styles them as red. So that can be scary. Again, like, you don't want to be setting up your build and deployment for the first time when you're in a crunch. Do it right at the start of your project when there's less emergency, there's less of a rush, and get through it so you don't need to be stressed by that. You have time to get that stuff working. Your anxiety level will thank you if you know you can deploy from the start, so that deployment becomes routine. It's a non-event. I've been reading about the continuous integration and continuous deployment approaches to development recently, because those terms get used a lot, but I wanted to get back to the original meanings of things to get understand them better. But yeah, that's a big emphasis in the continuous integration and continuous deployment worlds. You want, I guess, especially the continuous deployment world. There's another related term that I'm forgetting now. But yeah, making deployment a non-event, so that it's not a big thing, a week-long thing, a month-long thing, a nights and weekends thing, but it's just something you can do and rush off pretty quickly. Maybe your iOS build still takes a little while to run, but it runs smoothly because you've done it before. You've done it multiple times a week, potentially. It's interesting that it says installing CocoaPods, because I'm pretty sure it is in fact installed, but yeah, we just go along with that. So while this build is running, I'm going to get logged into Apple's tooling here and remember how to do that. And you can just watch, if you want, the console running along the side there to see what's happening. If anything red comes up again, I'll stop to look at that. I don't always remember the URL, but I think developer.apple.com is a good starting point. Wow, that's a new look and feel. So maybe developer.apple.com, isn't it? I'm going to click on account and get logged in. Hopefully my personal info will not be shared to you. I do have 1Password. 1Password is really great. Use a password manager. It's so important for security. Yeah, maybe remember me so I'm not logging in on the stream. And my super secret password is hidden there, so that's good. It's going to confirm that I am who I say I am. I don't care that this one-time code is on the stream, or part of it is, because it's been used one time, and so now nobody can use it again. So we're now logged into my Apple developer account, and we want to go over to App Store Connect. Yeah, that's the one. That's what it's called. If I was a big Apple developer, I'd remember this stuff, but I'm just a lowly Expo developer. I shouldn't even say that, because even joking about it is not good. I am here celebrating Expo and React Native because I think you should develop on the platform that works for you, and this is the platform that works for me. So sorry for joking about that. But the point is, I'm less familiar with the Apple ecosystem because I'm not in it all the time. I'm working on the web, and I'm working in Expo. I see now that we have updated to paid application agreements I need to accept at some point, so I'm going to ignore that for now. But in App Store Connect, let's go under My Apps. I would expect that probably Expo's documentation would have instructions on this stuff, or at least lightweight stuff. And if not, you can Google it. And Apple changes this, just like they changed the homepage I was confused by the other day. So we're going to click into My Apps to see what we have here. This is where you configure new apps. I should say, I didn't say this earlier. In addition to Apple sending your app to the App Store, you can also use a service they have called TestFlight to deploy test builds. And so that allows you to get a built version of the app with its own home screen icon onto your device and other testers, friends and family, coworkers, before you have to go through full App Store approval and put it out publicly. So in my development process, I work locally and build something out, and then when something's working well enough, I do a test build, and that gets it out for me. And then once I'm done, I'm ready for version 1.0, or once things are stable enough to roll it out for incremental versions, then I submit it to Apple for approval. Usually takes a couple business days, and then it goes out to end users. So what we're working on right now is getting a test build of the app going and submitted to Apple. The first one might take a little longer, so it might not happen on this stream itself, but showing you the process to go through to submit it. Abel says, to be honest, this is way too much for me. I'm just a Java beginner. I understand, not knowing what's going on when you jump into here. I think the takeaway for you, Abel, would be Expo is a platform that lets you build apps for iOS, Android, and the web. something to consider in the future. It's built on top of React Native, which is built on top of React, which is in turn a web framework, very, very popular front-end web framework. And so if you are new to JavaScript and you want to work in React on the web, it's a great place to go, and the React docs are great. If you're working in Java on Android, that's something that's great as well, and you could flip over to the React Native world at some time in the future. So, Abel, if you decide to head off, I won't be offended. Thanks for joining in, and good luck on your development journey. Feel free to hit me up at codingitwrong.com. I love to chat with new developers, so feel free to reach out if there's anything that I can give you in my various development experiences, ideas as you're getting started in your development journey. So thanks for joining. All right, so our build is continuing here. Lots and lots of native code that's being built. We have my app Shirley here, so let's go ahead and get the new app started up. I don't think Expo would create a new app for you configured under here, under App Store Connect. So probably you're going to want to do that yourself. I'm going to click plus, new app. I don't know what bundle is, so we're going to say new app. Very welcome, Abel. See ya. So this app, is it for iOS, macOS, or tvOS? I'm going to say iOS. There's interesting things with the new Apple M1 chips about going on macOS. But that's not anything I'm doing right now. I don't even think you need to select macOS for that. So let's choose a name. Let's call it Firehose. Apple may object if there's already a Firehose. I may need to add qualifiers. There's like multiple names for the app depending on whether it's the App Store or the home screen or whatever. Primary language is English US. Bundle ID. See some of my older projects in here. So here's Coding It Wrong Firehose. That was added there by Expo, so that's there, ready to go. SKU. I think for this I just use com.codingitwrong.firehose. If it kicks this out, we can go and compare with Shirley. User access. All users. Which users see the app and App Store Connect? Users within my App Store account. It's just me and my App Store account, so full access is fine. Click create. So this is getting it started. There are one or more validation areas before. Firehose already being used. So yeah, one of the interesting things about centralized things in the App Store. I'm actually not sure that Firehose is going to go to full production. I just might use it in test flight mode. But let's call it Firehose Links. I mean, Shirley, I called Shirley to do, so Firehose Links is fine. And if I regret this later, then you will find out, and then you can make a better choice with your naming. But I think Firehose Links works fine. The metaphor, by the way, with Firehose is I bookmark so many links, and there's so much information coming at me that it's like, I got to manage this fire hose of too much information. And so it's a link tracking app to record a bunch of links, and then I can read them at my leisure later. So that's the metaphor for Firehose. So Firehose Links, the page is there. Maybe because my processor is so pegged here. It's taken a little while to load. And it says, prepare for submission. Wow, I feel a little rushed here. I'm not ready to submit Firehose Links for submission just yet. But that's okay. We don't need to do that. What we can do is click over here to test flight. And let's see what's under there as we're working ahead, as my processor is still cranking away valiantly, trying to build all this native code from scratch. Something to be said to just programming in JavaScript, isn't there? So it says build, submit a build to start testing. Upload your builds using one of several tools. And that is what we're going to do when we're ready. I'm going to go ahead and open that up. It's Transporter. So Transporter is an app you can get from Apple. If you're building a normal iOS app using Xcode, Apple's official tooling, it can handle submitting the app files directly from within there. When you're doing it yourself using something separate like Expo, you just get a built.ipa file. And from there, you need another way to submit it. So here's Transporter. And you can see I've been uploading lots of versions of Shirley in the past. And so we're going to get to add some variety there. You know, if you're using Transporter for the first time, you'll probably need to log into your Apple account. But yeah, once the app is ready, we'll be able to upload it using Transporter. And I believe at that point, it's going to show up in here. And Apple is, I won't say great, but they're better now about walking you through, okay, you've done this. Now this is remaining. And so you don't need to really think through a ton in advance. You can kind of go one step at a time to get your apps submitted to App Store Connect. Let's see about test information if there's anything I can put in here. Complete test information is required to submit a build for external testing. But I don't want to do external testing. I want to do internal testing because there's less Apple testing there. And again, at first, I'm just wanting to get the app sent to me myself, the same user that is doing the development and has the App Store account. So we may not need to do this beta app information yet. I'd really like to keep it as minimal as possible. All right, well, we're still building. If this goes on for too long and I run out of things to stall about, we may call it an end in 5, 10, 15 minutes. We'll see. But I have more blabbing to do in the meantime. So let's take a look through here to see. We're going to Firehose URLs for redirect. Yeah, I am worried about making too many changes to the code while this native build is happening. I'd really like to keep that going to avoid breaking something, because it could be a mysterious breakage, and I don't want to do mysterious breakage. So let's instead think about what else we can do to get the app shored up and in good shape. First, let's check our Git log. I see that I've done a bunch of commits locally here that I haven't pushed up to the server, so I'm going to push those up. I may have actually made that release change. Oh, there's a number of things that got changed in here. So let me take a look at them. Local Netlify folder. Okay, so there's some Netlify stuff. So let me add those changes. Local Netlify folder. This is iOS stuff, so I don't want to commit that yet. iOS stuff. iOS stuff. EAS is iOS stuff. That's iOS stuff. Okay. So it's like, so let's just say ignore local Netlify config folder. All right. And just doing a commit like that doesn't make any changes to the local files, so that is not going to break the build in any way. Let's do a work in progress commit. Let's not do. Let's wait until we get this build working, this EAS iOS build working before we commit that. But we can go ahead and push this commit up. Build is still running. Let's take a minute to look at Firehose Expo back in Netlify and see the state of things here. We have site overview. It says the app is at firehose-expo.netlify.app, and it shows a little screenshot of it even. Anyway, as well. That's kind of fancy. Very nice. Your site is deployed. There might be other Netlify settings you could get into. It is secured automatically with HTTPS when you're running on Netlify. I don't want this stream to be too Netlify focused, and also I'm not too experienced with it, so I might feel like I'm stumbling around. So I'm not going to do too much in there. A lot of Netlify resources online. One hint we had that something's proceeding is this other terminal has popped up. This is actually the JavaScript for our app compiling. Interestingly, even though we had Expo running here on one terminal, the build process uses a separate boot up of Metro, of React Native's build system, maybe because it's building for the native version. I'm not actually sure why, but this is good progress, although it still says it's building native code here, so it's interesting. You want to give these things a little time. I think once these native things build, my experience is that it doesn't take quite this long doing further native builds. So this is compiling the local version of React Native and everything like that. Probably it would only be when you update to new versions of Expo that you would have a long build process like this again. I would characterize, I don't know, I feel like in the mornings, my kids are watching TV, I'm building the latest version of the app. I feel like it only takes 5 or 10 minutes to do an iOS build locally, and then I upload it to Transporter to Apple. So not too bad. We've got our app up on Netlify. Let me go ahead and just because I don't want to mess things up on the stream, I don't even want to make changes to the Readme file while this is building, just in case that kicks something off to reload itself. So let's think forward from here. Let's talk ahead to what we're going to be building next time. I can explain the next feature we're going to do. Do I want to explain the next feature we're going to do? Let's not. Let's not talk about URLs for navigation just yet. Instead, what I want to do is talk about where we are and where we're going. So we've gotten the skeleton of our app working. It's a nice general way to navigate, go between different screens, get a nice material design look and feel, move around the app. But there's nothing domain specific, which is to say there's nothing actually useful for the thing I want to build yet in the app. We're going to go there next, sort of. I think before we even do anything useful, because we have a real existing backend for the app already, I think what we're going to need to do next is log in after all this. And that's almost certainly not going to be today. That'll probably be where we start next stream, next week. So have a login. We're going to set up login screens in the app. As I've gone through this, I've found different patterns depending on how your app navigation works and the things you want to hide when you're logged out and the things you want to show in the user interface. So I'm going to be copying over those patterns. That's something else that I'd love to turn into a reusable library once I feel a bit more confident about it. And once I have two, there's a principle in duplication of, wait until you have, not even when you have two of something, but when you have three, when something's duplicated 3 times, then that's when it's time to pull it out and create a reusable abstraction. I might not follow that here. I might actually wait for the second case where in the second Expo web app, if I have the login working a similar way, I might feel confident enough to pull it out into a shared library. But we'll see. That might be something I do a bit later as well. So you want to be patient with this process. Not a whole lot of output here. The transform cache was reset. Okay, interesting. What does that mean? There's a lot of implementation details being thrown out in the console here that we're not familiar with. But one way you can tell something's happening is, well, I guess OBS, my streaming software, and my Android emulator are taking a lot of processor now. And I see Node is after that. So, I think just to give us the best chance of this completing on the stream, I'm going to go ahead and quit the Android emulator just to free up some processing cycles. I should point out for the sake of the stream, I am still on an Intel processor here. I haven't done React Native development on an Apple M1. For client work right now, I do have an Apple M1, but on that project, I'm only doing web development. And there are some stumbles. There's some challenges getting some of these open source dependencies running on Apple Silicon. They update at different rates. So just know, it's another great reason to get your whole build process working from the start. Maybe you'll find out that something in this set of open source tooling is not yet working on Apple Silicon. And that would be really great to find out right at the start of your project so you don't get hit up with a big obstacle at the end. Oh, copy pods. Let's see who's going to finish first. Am I going to run out of filling the time before we do anything else? Signing. When you see signing, that's a good sign. Unintentional. That means that the app bundle, the native code is done, and it's doing a cryptographic signature to make sure, for security purposes, so that Apple knows this is the unmodified version of the app, because they've got everything locked down. And yeah, Xcode build, all kinds of long, complicated nonsense is running. Thank goodness that Expo and Fastlane have abstract this stuff all away, and they are very well adopted tools to keep these things up to date. So maybe any minute now we're going to have an iOS build. Let's peek into our folder here to see if we can see anything. Oh, it just popped in. Did you see that? Build whatever.ipa. So a .ipa file is when you're doing iOS development, that's the built iOS application. You're not going to see that as an iOS user because Apple doesn't want you pulling down iOS application files. And if you do, security is going to prevent you from running them unless you're a hacksaw. And I've legitimately never done anything like that because it's too unreliable for me. But we see here, build successful. You can find the build artifacts in that IPA file. Great. Cool. So I was able to fill the time for long enough. So now what we're going to be able to do is to take this Firehose Expo build file and just drop it onto Transporter. I am sure that there is going to be some things that are slow or worn out here, but let's see what happens. It says Firehose links version 1.0.0 with a build number 1, and that works out great. The way the version numbering works in Apple is you have to increment the build number in parentheses every time you need a new build that's submitted to them, but it can be the same overall version number. And we are working towards version 1.0.0 of Firehose links, so this is great. I have no idea what that number is, maybe a unique identifier for this build. And we can see that it pulled the name Firehose links from Apple's side. So let's click deliver. And we'll see. I'm sure something will come up here. Let's find out what happens. The more warnings and errors I run across, the better, because that's one less thing that you might be confused by when you're doing your own build with Expo app. So it's verifying the app for security. To wax philosophical for a moment, it's interesting how easy it is just to put something up on the web. Not super trivial when it comes to rich JavaScript apps, but you can put something out there. Netlify isn't preventing you from putting anything up there, and yet with Apple, things are more complex. As someone who likes rapid development, that can feel kind of like a downer sometimes to be limited by Apple in that way. At the same time, security is just an absolute mess in the software world now. I told a coworker of mine when he was giving me some good challenges about approaches of mine in software development, if there's one thing that would cause me to rethink everything I think about software development, it would be security and the ethical responsibility we have as developers to protect users' personal data, to protect their physical safety. I mean, there's a war in Ukraine going on right now, and people over there, people that are under attack, there's physical safety, of course, paramount. Reporters, people in the military, security is needed for their personal communications, politicians, journalists. And so people that build secure messaging apps, or even apps that aren't specifically focused on that case, protecting people and protecting their personal data, protecting them from identity theft or detection by malicious parties is extremely important. And so sometimes I feel down on Apple for all the security they have in place. There's reasons like that. It was really good that they have security in place. And so some of the complexities of our development world. So I see now that the app is being uploaded. It's a 130 megabyte app. So we were warned that our JavaScript was 500 kilobytes. That's big. It's too big. And yet for native applications, it's 130 megabytes. It's one of the reasons I kind of like being able to make the same code available on the web and on mobile. Maybe you don't want to download a 130 megabyte native file. Maybe you're on a Linux phone and you'd like to be able to use the web there. One of the reasons I'm glad I can build apps for the web is I just started using Linux for some of my personal work. And so having the web option there is really, really nice. I built the work outside of Apple's walled garden. If you can't tell, I have very broad interests and beliefs when it comes to software. So I like really considering all the different views and exposing myself to them. So our app is uploading. It's not taking too long on my internet connection here. I'm sure the app's not going to be approved in the time we have on the stream. We have 19 minutes left, and that's okay. Another great reason to get your app up deployed early is for initial reviewing. Apple is going to want to do in the first place, get that started early so that Apple is familiar with it. They can just review incremental updates later. All right, so Firehose Links was delivered on March 4th, live on the stream. It's been delivered to Apple. So let's go back over to the web and see what we have on here. There it is. There's that Apple icon. Test flight builds. Let's reload on here. Takes a little while. So version 1.0.0. So I think it has detected that a version has been uploaded, and that's the version that's been made. This is something that I've commonly seen, is if you pull up the screen right after you pull up a new version, it doesn't necessarily show right away. But now our build is done. And so I think, if y'all don't mind the shift, I think what I'd like to finish in our time together today is, because I don't think we'll get our app fully deployed and approved and onto a native device. I'm going to do that at the start of next stream. But what I want to do is the very last thing when it comes to the web and navigation of our app. I think we can do that in the 17 minutes remaining. And then that rounds out our app skeleton and navigation. We'll be ready to implement login. Next time we'll start with the finalization of the iOS build, and then we'll be able to get login working. So, frustratingly, Safari hides the full URL of the page we're on. So let's pull up Firefox, because I think Firefox still respects the web enough to show URLs. Google is also hiding them. Doesn't make me feel good. I'm getting philosophical here. So pulling up the app on here, running our app locally, as we navigate around the app, the URL is always the same. And yet, URLs are such a key part of an app, and for a long time, even with rich front-end apps, we expect the path that you're on to change as you move around. One of the reasons why is so that when you reload the app, if you're on a screen, you'll be taken back to that same screen. When I go to another, reload the app, I'm taken back to the home screen, and so I lose my place. Also, if there's publicly available content, you want users to be able to share the URL that they were on, or even bookmark it for their own local purposes. So really what we like to do is, as we're navigating around the app, we love the URL to be updated to represent where we are. And thankfully, React Navigation has that built in. I'm going to show you where that is before I go and look at my cheater code. Deep linking. How to configure your app to handle deep links on various platforms. So URLs are something that can work in native mobile as well, where you can get a link from the web, and then if you have that app installed on your phone, it'll take you to that app and send that link to the app. But this linking is also used on the web for web support. So React Navigation on the web, it supports URL integration in the browser. And so what this means is that every React Navigation screen that you're on is going to correspond to a URL, so that the paths in the web are going to work really well. And this works great with Expo and React Native Web. So let's get that implemented. Let's close our other tabs. Let's look and see what I have over here. Yeah, so let's start from here. Again, I will just acknowledge and say, I don't remember any of this stuff off the top of my head. This is my second Expo web app that I've built, and I'm looking at my notes at the previous one. If you are watching this and you'd like to have this fast forward as well, my previous app Surely is available open source, and it'll be available in the links. And so you could fork that repo. Instead of watching these steps and going along with it, you could fork the Surely repo, strip out all of my application specific stuff, and build your own stuff. It is open source, and you're welcome to do that. I'm happy to make that available to you. We're going through a tutorial here together in order to see how to build this up from scratch, so that you have a deeper understanding. And as you build it up, you can just build just what you need. You can skip over parts you don't need. Sublime Text is reminding me, though, that we haven't committed these changes. So now that we were able to at least successfully submit our app using Transporter. So let's commit those changes, because we don't want to lose those. We don't want to commit these built IPA files. In general, you don't want to commit built files to the repo. And web build was ignored by default, which is nice. So let's go into our git ignore and say we want to ignore build-star. So anything that starts with build-say.ipa should be ignored. So now that build file doesn't show up in our list here. So this is a change for building for iOS. Our links here explaining our dependencies needed for building for iOS. And we do know that's complete, because after we added those, nothing else was needed. We don't know for sure, because this is my local machine, so I might have other stuff, but I think that's complete. Adding these release instructions, and I'm going to include that build number, even though we haven't used it yet. It'll be a reminder for the future. So run, as we did, run yarn build iOS, and once build completes, upload the IPA file using Transporter. That's what we did. Now we can see that our build process filled in that bundle identifier in our app JSON to tell the app what identifier is used for iOS, so we want to keep that. This is eas.json, so configuring of that EAS service. Distribution internal, there's not a whole lot there. It looks like that's pretty much boilerplate, so we'll keep that. And then our build command that keeps me from having to remember all that stuff. Okay, and so we say configure build for iOS. All right, so now that we have a clean git status, no changes, we can build this out. To switch topics back again, we're going to build out linking in our application. And the situation we're in is whatever screen we click on, there are no URLs. We'll know we're done when URLs are showing up here across the top. So let's configure it this way. We want in our navigation file const linking. I'm going to look at the specifics in the other app and copy it over. Linking just has a config key. And this comes pretty well out of the React Navigation documentation, but I'm looking at my example code. Last time we found that I regretted that. We'll see if I regret that this time. Sorry that ESLint is cluttering it up so much there. Please ignore that. So under config, we say screens. That's all we need. So what are the screens? So React Navigation, I admire this project so much. It is so complex because there is so much complexity to native navigation. There was many different and there still are different React Native navigation stack libraries, because there was nothing officially there from start. React Navigation has risen up as the sort of primary one that's the most widely adopted and recommended by React Navigation officially. There's still a lot of complexity there. I don't hold that against them. they've done a number of API changes over the major releases to, as they find things about their abstractions that aren't quite right, or rather they could be better to better serve the needs of native navigation, even as native navigation needs change as iOS and Android evolve. And so I don't begrudge them. I don't know how to do it better. I am so happy for the open source contributors that make React navigation work. And so I'm willing to take on a little complexity of figuring out how it works. So in my understanding of how this concept of screens works in React navigation, when we look at our, can I split view? Oh no, we want panels. Nah, I forget how to do this in layout. That's what it is. 2 rows. That's good. I am new to Sublime Text. So let's open navigation down here as well. So here on the top here, we're up at our linking config. We're basically going to configure linking settings for the different screens. Looking back down here to our main drawer navigator, the name is hello and another. So that's the name of the screen, is hello. So we want that as the key here. We're configuring the hello screen. Now we have some other screens nested underneath there. We say screens. And what are the screens nested under hello? They're named hello screen 1 and hello screen 2. Great. Hello screen 1. And what we do here is under this nested screens here, we have the screen name, and what we put next to it is the URL that we want. And let's call this, because this is under hello effectively. And thinking about it like drilling down, I want to call this like hello like that. And then hello screen 2, we're going to say screen 2, like we've drilled down. Conceptually, that kind of feels like we're drilling down in there. And this all feels very weird and placeholdery, unfortunately. Pretty soon after we get into building out a real linking app, these screens are going to make more sense. But for now, we'll just having some kind of functioning URLs will work. And I certainly don't have enough in my head about the linking to be able to explain for sure off the top of my head all of how this works. For example, like the top level screen hello, which is the drawer navigator, doesn't have a URL tied to it. But that's because, to my understanding of it, when you pull up that drawer navigator, a specific screen in the drawer is being shown as well. And hello screen 1 comes up. And so that screen is the screen that has a URL tied to it. There may be edge cases that causes problems for our app or in the future, but mostly for surely this was sufficient and enough. So let's go add in the config for the other stuff. We have one more screen, another. That's a drawer. So under the another drawer, we have another screen 1. And even though there's not multiple screens in that stack, it just is what it is. For our real screens, there probably would be a way to drill down in there. And we'll just call that another. So these are our 3 URLs. It's almost like we have our components down below, and this is like configuration we're overlaying on top of it. And this is all, I would not be surprised if I get this wrong, but this is almost what we need. This sets up the config, but this variable is not used or tied into anywhere. And I think ESLint is going to run in a second and tell us that. Yep, sure enough. It says linking is assigned a value but never used. And we do, in fact, need to use it. This is a config that's passed somewhere. And it looks like it's actually just passed to the navigation container. So the outermost navigation container, which is a component that comes from React Navigation, we say, here's the linking configuration for all the navigation stuff that lives underneath it. I would not be surprised if I get something wrong, but I believe that this may give us what we need. So let's take a look. Nope, I do see an error. Sometimes when you're changing low-level configuration like that, auto reload doesn't work as much as you'd need. So let's just try doing a full refresh. Yeah, no, that still is not working. So let's scroll up to the first error. Found invalid properties in the configuration in another screen 1. Did you forget to specify them under a screens property? Probably. So let's take a look and see. Oh yeah, check it out. So config screens, hello, the drawer navigator, it has screens under it in turn. And so another is a drawer navigator, we need screens there. Even though there's only one thing under it, that's just the data structure it wants. If I was a person who is using TypeScript, I'd probably get some help there. But I resist TypeScript in a lot of cases, and so I don't get that help. So check it out. I'm going to go back to the root of our application. And when we go there, we're redirected to /hello because our app sends us to the hello drawer, hello screen 1 by default. And when we get there, we're taken to the hello URL. Let's see what happens when we click on go to screen 2. We're taken to hello/screen 2. When we go back, we're taken back out. You can go to another, which is /another. We go to hello screen 2. Now let's try this. Reloading the app. And we're taken back right where we were. Going to another, reloading the app, we're taken back to right where we were. So yeah, this is great. We're making progress getting URLs working. I'm going to commit this, and then I think there's probably one bug here that we can find, but let me commit this as it is. Get initial screen URL linking working. This is more or less transparent on the iOS side, unless you're actually configuring deep linking, which I don't need. But let me try one more thing. So you're on screen 1 and you click into screen 2. And now you can go back to screen 1. So let me see what happens when I reload screen 2 here. You're taken to screen 2, but you actually don't have the back button anymore. Let's see what happens when I go over to another and go back to here. So we're still taken back to screen 2. So actually when we do this, screen 1 is not accessible at all. So this is surprising when we're used to the web. Like, why is this? Like, we're on hello/screen 2. We want to be able to get back. Why can't we get back to that parent route? Well, the fact that it's a parent, the fact that it's nested, is not something that React Navigation has knowledge of. I just called these two parallel screens under these two different URLs. So it feels like we're drilling down to a lower level. And if you're used to React Router on the web, you're used to like things being nested at that level and kind of going down and going back up. That's not really the paradigm when it comes to React navigation and drawer navigators. A drawer can have any screens on it you want. It's not necessarily set to always start with one. You could push a screen and then another and then another and then another and kind of have them repeat. And when you don't have URLs involved, it's just adding things onto a stack. It's these standalone things. So what do we do to get things to work more like we expect, where when you go to one of these tabs, and even if you load the app from a URL where you're further down on here, that you always get that main hello screen underneath it? Well, that's a trick that it took me not a lot of fiddling, but it took me some fiddling to figure out. And what I found was, under these drawer navigators, we want, above screens, is an initial route name. And the initial route we want is hello screen 1. So what this means, or at least what the impact this will make here is, hey, when we get into this drawer, whatever screen we're coming into through a URL, make sure that this route here meaning the name for a screen, not a URL path, make sure that this is the screen that's pushed on first before we go to whatever screen the URL has. For completeness, I'm going to put it down here under the another screen, even though there is only one route under there. But so I think what we'll see, and this is one of the reasons I'm glad I had this as separate commits, so that we can see this fix the bug, and you could look at it separately in the commit history. What I think we'll find now when we go under screen 2, when we load it up from scratch, is that now we have the back button, and now we can get back to screen 1. And no matter where we load it up from another, we can get over it. Starts on screen 1, starts on screen 2. You will notice, I think we saw this last time, but in React Navigation, if you've already drilled down under a child screen in one drawer, the state of that drawer is preserved for you. And so you can go back to it and go back where you were. And that's good. No problems there. There's probably a way you can configure that otherwise if you prefer, so that clicking a hello always brings you back to the same place. But it's kind of a nice little bonus that I don't mind at all. And again, to see that bug fixed, when we reload the app on hello, typed in there. When we reload the app on hello screen 2, we're on screen 2, we can get, that was weird. I wonder if there's something strange going on. We're on screen 2, click on here, we go back to screen 1. All right, we're good to go. So let's commit that fix. We'll say set initial route names to avoid getting stranded when reloading a detail URL. All right, there's one more thing we need to add to get this working properly on Netlify, and to make sure that we see that. I want to publish the app as is to the web to see the problem. So I'm going to, actually we're going to need to add in the extra instructions here. So let me first for now say Netlify deploy prod, because we've got changes to our URLs on the web. While this is happening, I'm going to go ahead and pull up the app on native mobile just to confirm for you that iOS is still working. We reload the app. It's again going to pull down what's in locally, and we can see that we can still go to screen 2 and move around, and everything's fine there. The URLs is, for the way we're using the app currently, just an implementation detail on the web. All right, so let's now pull up our app on Netlify. We pull it up. I might need to reload it to make sure I get the latest version. Oh, did I build? I didn't do a local build. Yeah, I need to do Expo build web. So that's interesting. That's one thing that when we set up a deploy command in just a minute, we're going to fix that so that we don't have to remember to do the Expo build web and then do the Netlify deploy. But there's one more step we're going to need in the middle, and I want to show you the bug first before we do the solution. We are at 6 o'clock. If there's anybody on that needs to run at 6, take it easy. Thank you for joining. Otherwise, we'll be done soon. So now that we've built the new version that has URL support, let's now deploy that. Seems like I'm going to overrun every time. We'll see. Maybe I'm working in big chunks later and we'll get end 15 minutes early some week. I'm looking forward to spending time with my family before the weekend gets started. So now we've published the app. Now let's reload. Now when we pull up the app, just like in local, we're redirected to /hello. Other than netlify.app local thing, hey, if it's for your own purposes, run on netlify.app. That's great, but things are starting to look nice and professional. Hello screen 2 opens up. All these URLs are changing. That's very nice. So now let's just make sure that reload works. We reload on hello screen 2. Oh no, now we've got page not found. What's going on there? If we go back to the root of our app, it comes up fine, but if we reload when we're on another page, and actually we're resent to /hello. Even if we reload under /hello, we get page not found. So that's not a great experience. So if you've been doing rich client apps for a long time, you've probably run across this before. It's the idea that, running in the client as we navigate around, the browser's URL is changed, but when we reload the page, that URL is sent to the server, and the server needs to know how to handle that. And for most single page apps, what we tend up doing, unless you've got some server-side rendering magic happening there, usually what you end up doing is saying, hey, whatever URL I'm on under here, if it's not found, if it's not an image or a font or one of those other JavaScript files or anything, if it's not found, send the main application itself, because that means that I'm on a route, a client-side navigation route. So the way we can set that off on Netlify is as follows. See, I have 2 panes there. We have a redirects file. This is what I was pasting in before, and then I stopped it. So I added some comments here. This is the Netlify config for client-side routing, and I linked to a page where I found the answer. Basically this is saying for any path that you're on, if you don't know what to do with it, then redirect to index.html, which exists there, the main page that serves up the app, and give a status of 200. So this is the config file that Netlify is going to need for that purposes. It needs to be redirects. I just put this in the root of my app because that worked fine. Oops, no, not under Shirley. This is a Firehose app. I just put it under there. And so then I want to get this copied over into the web build folder when we do a build. So let's get, I need to memorize how to use Sublime Text. Layout single. Interesting. Okay, so we want to create a command, and let's call it deploy web, just to remind ourselves that it's for web. So what we want is run expo build web, as we've been doing, and that's the, for most Linux and Mac OS command line, to say run one command and then run another one. Then we say copy redirects into web build. So that's going to add this file into our built folder. And we copy it in every time because it's not committed to source control, so that when it's cleared out and regenerated, it'll be in there. And then we say netlify deploy prod. So this now becomes our web deploy command. And actually, I'm going to add it into the documentation here. So let's, here. Release for web, run expo build web. Wait. Oh, this is not right. I haven't updated my instructions. I made that sort of generic. For this project, I'm going to say expo yarn, because this is probably going to be a personal project. Yarn deploy web. those notes say deploys to configured Netlify site. There you go. So yarn deploy. I say that with so much confidence, but it's because I copied and pasted it. But let's try to deploy web and seeing if this redirects file that's added in will help. What we should see is if you watch the sidebar closely and if you can see the font size, this redirects file should appear under the web build folder at the appropriate point, and that's what will cause it to be uploaded to Netlify at the following point. And hopefully no errors at this point, because I love you all on the stream. I want to go spend time with my family. So, I noticed actually that the web build folder disappeared. It's good for consistency that Expo build web clears it out so you don't have old files in there. But that's why we need to copy the redirects file every time, is because that way it's put in there every time. And I do see the redirects file. So that should be up there on Netlify now. So now if we, let's reload from scratch. Hopefully that'll reload the new versions of it automatically. So now let's see what happened when we reload. Previously, when we reloaded on one of these URLs we were redirected to, we got a page not found. Now the page is found. Now, even when we're accessing the server side from this path, we still get the same app served up. Same with screen 2. So now we have really nice URL linking working for whichever screen we're on. We get a URL. It's just nice to let us know where we are, and reloading does what we expect. It takes us back to where we are. Once we get into, I don't know if it'll come, I think it'll come up in some cases here. You can even have dynamic IDs in the URL as you would expect. So you can have like a specific record loaded up, and then it'll be retrieved by ID. All right, we're at a great stopping point. So let me summarize briefly, and then we'll be done. So what did we accomplish today? Let me check back and see what we accomplished today. On our native application on iOS, we got the header bar working so that even when we're in light mode here, the clock and the other things up there were white, just like the white text here, so we get a consistent contrast for the header bar. We also got dark mode background working for the content of the app there, so that the full screens, our whole app looks very coolly updating to light mode and dark mode. We got the Readme fleshed out a bit more. We got that responsive sidebar. Don't forget about that. Let's take a look at that up on Netlify, where our sidebar on a wide screen just shows up persistently on the side, and then on a narrow screen it collapses, and we can use a nice React drawer navigation animation to pull that up. I think I was saying drawer navigation earlier when I meant stack navigation. My bad. Yeah, so this nice responsive navigation working. We also got a URL-based navigation working here so the URLs look good. We got our app deployed. We got it running on the web, and we got our app submitted to Apple. Let's reload the Apple page to see what happened over there, if we've made any progress. So we've proven that the app works on the web. We haven't yet proven that it works on Apple, and I don't think we will today because I'm ready to be done. But as I reload the page, let's see where we've gotten to. All right, this is good so I can demo this. Pause the end of the stream. Version 1.0.0 says missing compliance. Let me make a note for next time, but we are going to go into this. What does this mean? We click manage. This is where Apple's security stuff gets very scary. Please read Apple's documentation and make your own informed decisions to make sure you are legally complying with this export stuff. I'm going to say very little to make sure I don't get myself in trouble legally, but I've done my own research on what's correct for me and the client work that I've done. Does your app use encryption? Select yes, even if your app only uses the standard encryption within Apple's operating system. Pretty much any app that's going to be hitting a server is using encryption if you're using HTTPS, I believe. So I'm choosing yes because of that. Do your own research, please. Next, does your app qualify for any of these exemptions? And let's see here. You can select yes for this question if the encryption in your app is limited to authentication, digital signature, or the decryption of data or files. And it is my understanding for myself, not a recommendation for your app, that it does qualify for this exemption. So I'm saying yes. If you're making a call to HTTPS, you are required to submit a year-end self-classification report to the U.S. government. I'm going to take a screen share of that to make sure I comply with that. With this, we're going to start internal testing. I click and it says ready to submit. Oh man, are we going to... All right, sorry family, we're gonna run a little bit long here. Let's take a look and see. So now that we've done that, I'm registered as a tester under my account under test flight. Let me reload this. It looks like I need to add myself as a tester. Let's do that next time. Let's stay on the hook because I am 9 minutes over my time. Our app has been marked as ready to submit here. And so an interesting note here is that for internal testing purposes, Apple doesn't require an extensive review. It seems right now. But I just need to get myself set up as a tester. And I'm not going to do that now so that I can go check on that in advance to be ready to go. But next time we're going to pick it up there to get our iOS build the rest of the way to be running on a machine, and we'll be good to go. So yes, next time we're going to deploy to iOS. From there, we're going to set up login. So we're really logging into our backend as a user. And from there, we might even be able to get started on our first feature to display links coming in from the backend side. And the great thing about that is it's going to be my app is going to be usable for me already. When you're doing side projects, it's great to shoot for getting your apps usable by yourself right away so that you're motivated to keep working on them. So that's about it for today. Thank you all so much for joining me. For the folks that joined live, for the folks that are joining on the recording afterwards, again, please get in touch. Check out codingitwrong.com to keep in touch with me to find out about the latest streams. You can see my YouTube blog. You can connect with me on open source Mastodon, LinkedIn as well, even though I didn't put it on there. Would love to be in touch and chat with you with what you're programming. I hope you'll join me next week for our next stream where we take our app further, where we continue to build for mobile and for web with Expo. It's been a great experience. No big stumbles this time like last time. But it's been a lot of fun. Thanks for joining in, and we hope to catch you next time. See ya.